Okay. Oh, good. That one still works. All right. Hello. Welcome. Okay. We are getting started. I did remember to hit the record button. Hooray. Hello, everyone. Yes. There have been some changes to the class schedule. I'm going to try and move this more. There, now I'm more centered. I got my little bow tie on today. Yeah. Whoops, wrong direction. There we go. Make that more centered. Yeah, it's got chocobos on it. I made it myself. I have some other like nerdy fabric I should make some with, so I figured I'd go for a professor look today. So there has been a slight schedule change. First off, I am switching. Oh, thank you for the bits, Trish stuff. Oh, look at them all falling in there. I love that. Look at that. Oh, look at it right there. I am switching to a Thursday only class, partially because I have a lot of things I want to do, and I realized I don't want to completely exhaust myself. It's been a while since I've been on the constant teaching schedule, so my body's just not used to it, and I actually kind of have burnt myself out. So I apologize for that, that's why I took last week off. Secondly, I don't want to run out of projects so quickly, so this will give us a chance to kind of do a lot of things, and then it will also give us time to actually like get our supplies in hand if anyone has to get other things, and so I don't overwhelm people with like, oh well, I don't have that, and I gotta do 2 new projects in 1 week, and I don't have these things, oh my gosh. So it's gonna be on Thursdays at 2 p.m. to accommodate for everyone's schedules, everyone's budgets, and I will try and work with the supplies that we've already purchased, because I've purchased them as well. So I'm going to be working with what I've got. So we're reusing the watercolor paper that I had on my list for an earlier project. So I'm still going through that package. So today we're going to do some magic, which is also probably why I brought out the bow tie. I'm not sponsored by Dr. Pepper, but I have now made with real sugar. It's really fancy. Thank you, Amazon delivery, because we don't have that in my state. So I was like, hey, let's try it out. So Dr. Pepper's my favorite. Yeah. So today we're going to do some magic, because this is our project. We're going to make this fancy looking, really cool piece of artwork. This. That's right. Crayola markers. Plain old Crayola washable markers and some water. And you too can make a neat galaxy. So the supplies I have on hand, listed below if you're watching this on YouTube, so it'll be underneath this video. I myself got this big 40 pack because it has all of these colors. As a marker aficionado, I like many colors to choose from. I think this package in general costs about $13 because it's Crayola. It's not too terribly expensive. If you can only get the base set, there's nothing wrong with that. Out of this set, the colors I decided to select were some purples. So the colors that you're looking for, I selected black, because that'll be our space. And then usually there's a dark purple in the base sets anyway, so you'll want to select that. Or it could be a blue. This could also be like a blue color. Then there is a... also, pardon if there's any noise in the background. We've got some dishes going on. I picked ultraviolet, which is like a slightly lighter purple. Then I have this light purple called tropical violet. And I have this like pinky purple, which is called Wild Orchid. They're like nail polish colors almost. What I suggest, if you want to do a galaxy, go to Google. Go to Google Images and type pictures of galaxies and look up NASA pictures, because galaxies come in tons of colors. They comes in, I can speak English real well. They come in reds and blues and greens and oranges. They come in lots of colors. Nebulas come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. I actually did one in another color, like I did blues and oranges, but I was like, nah, I think I wanna make mine more of like a pinky purple, because I wanted to see how the black blended, and when you put enough on there, it did pretty well. So, but like I was like, ooh, let's make like a fancy nebula. So, yeah, you can do all sorts of colors. You don't have to use the colors that I wrote here. If your color palette is limited, that is okay. That is totally fine. You can substitute other colors in for the purples that I'll be using. Most of the nebulas, what you'll want to have is, here we go, a really light color in the center, and then a dark, like a medium color, and then a slightly darker color, and then like the black. That's what you're looking for. So we have our Crayola markers. That's our first main thing. And also, the biggest thing I recommend, I think the regular ones will work. People have looked on the packages. I've asked some friends, and it looks like Crayola markers are water soluble. They're like water based. I specifically got the washable markers because obviously they are water activated. They'll apparently wash off your clothes. Mystery to me. But I was like, oh, I could just put water on these and they become a paint basically. So I like to get the ones that are labeled washable markers. Second most important thing is going to be your paper. And a lot of times when you're using specific media in art, the type of paper or canvas that you put it on is going to determine how your media reacts. So in this case, I went with my Strathmore watercolor that I used in our tulip painting. I'm going to trim this down to 5x7 because I'm a strong believer of making artwork I can put into frames on my wall. Because I like to hang stuff up in pretty frames. Or if you're giving it to a relative and be like, look at this cool thing I made, and they'll be like, wow, that's really great, let me hang it on the wall. Watercolor paper will absorb a lot of water and will also allow the paint to spread and stick into the paper because it's very fibrous, it's very thick, and it's meant for water. So that's why I recommend watercolor paper. You could do cold press, you could do hot press. I like cold press because that's the one I picked. I'm sure there are differences. People in the comments below can also indicate their preferences. Experiment with both to see which one you like. So after that, we have our regular basics. Oh yes, there's someone else in the comments, so thank you for my bow tie, yes. I made this one myself. It was fabric from Spoonflower. It's got chocobos on it. My favorite fictitious birds. So other supplies. We of course have my ever so popular handy dandy water container. Recycled from an old cottage cheese container. Washed out, of course. I have a board with which to attach my watercolor paper to. It is the back of an old Bristol board package. I save all of these because they're nice, heavy cardboard. Also, if it's warm outside, make a nice fan, because my hair goes everywhere. They're great for taping stuff to work on. I like to tape my watercolor down. It's equivalent of like stretching the canvas, and it prevents your watercolor from bubbling up and curling up while you're working on it, because then the water just gets everywhere and there's a hot mess all over and no one wants that. Even though this stuff is washable, let's try and not make a mess. Then you want paper towel to, wipe off your brushes. We've got painter's tape. I like blue tape the best. to tape down your watercolor paper. I almost forgot what it was. Watercolor paper. We've got our watercolor brushes. These are also my brushes that are good for watercolors and acrylics. They are synthetic brushes. Everyone who comes in my chat, they're like, oh my gosh, a bow tie. Yes, I have that now. I love my bow ties. They're my favorite. I have big ol' Bertha here. This is going to be the main one I'm going to spread around my paint with. Then I have two smaller ones. If I want to do any smaller blending, I'll have this little medium-sized one, and then this smaller one, which I'm going to use to paint stars with. No, this is not my dog's bow tie. This is actually mine. I made this one. As I see my chat's like, is that yours? That's not your dog's, is it? Like, no, this is mine. I don't get mine muddy like my dog's, because I don't roll in the mud. We'll have... Oh, thank you for the cheer. Oh, I would love a matching bow tie. I have Starlit Wander in my chat going, oh, would you like a matching bow tie to your dog? Yes, if you could make one, that would be fantastic. I would love a matching bow tie. Other things you need. A ruler, a pair of scissors, and a pencil, because we're going to have to trim down our paper, because for some reason they don't want to make little notepads of paper that's the size that fits in frames. For whatever reason, I don't know. Oh no, mine's not a tieable one, it's just a clip. I like the clip because I'm lazy. I'm all about the clip ones. This was actually for a cosplay I did a while back. But I'm like, I can wear them in public because I can. Why not? Let's have fun. It's so dry in my house all the time. Okay, and with that, I think I've covered all of those. Oh, and last but not least, your smock. Even though this says ultra clean washable markers, I like to have a smock regardless, because I like to keep my stuff clean. You should want to keep your stuff clean, especially if you're, you know, younger, living with your parents. Let's try not to aggravate our parents, especially during this stay-at-home time. The less messes we'll make, the less yell fests we'll get, right? Let's go slide back there today. I'm feeling lazy. Alright, put my oh-so-favorite IKEA apron on. I was so excited when they had these at IKEA. It was the best. And now we get to play technical difficulties because I forgot to test the webcam that's at my desk. I forgot to plug it in before I started, so this could take a moment as we make sure the other one works. So in the meantime... Oh, what's the brush for? The brush is for... We are going to be putting water onto the markers that we place onto the watercolor paper, and that is going to cause them to blur and blend out to get this really neat effect. So, and that's where the magic happens. Because it's just going to look like a bunch of marker scribbles until we add water, and you're going to be like, magic. Because now that I know that they do this, I kind of want to draw a big picture and then like fill it in with like marker and then actually like color it like a watercolor and be like, yeah, I painted this with Crayola markers. And they'll be like, what? I'll be like, yeah, it's at my artist alley table. It's fine. No big deal. I colored this with Crayola. Once again, it's not the medium. It's the artist. So we're all going to become awesome artists today and make beautiful galaxies. Alright, so with that... Yeah, so this is my challenge now. I'm going to make a big piece of artwork and sell it at my booth made with Crayola markers. That's my new challenge. Let's see if I can do it. Alright, so I'm going to get my markers. Everyone pick out your colors while I attempt to make sure the camera works. Oh, one last thing. For those who are subscribing or are interested in subscribing on Twitch, I have an emote now. It's super fun. It's it's me pointing and going, save your file. For all of us artists who are bad at saving our files as we draw on the computer. Because I'm sometimes bad at that too. So if you're ever interested in having that emote, it's on mine if you want to subscribe. Okay, let us go to the tabletop and see if this works. Okay. Oh, I forgot to also mention, because I'm a doof, white paint. We're going to need that, because we're going to put stars in our galaxy. Put those to the side. That to the side. Alright, move my board out of the way. Move my galaxy out of the way, because I'm use that as my... Alright, get my watercolor paper out. Now I just have a small one. If you have a bigger piece of paper, your method might be a little different, and that's okay. And also remember, everyone's galaxy is probably going to look a little different than mine, and that's okay. Because all galaxies are different in space. There's a lot of them out there. Alright, you. Come on out. There we go. Thank you. So I have my piece of paper. Now I gotta measure this. Get it to come out to the size I want it to. Now, as always, whatever ruler you have is just fine. I like to use the grid ruler because, well, there we go. Now the numbers are right side up for me. I like the grid ruler because it gives me exact perpendicular lines and parallel lines. That way it's less thought for me. But a regular ruler will work just fine. So this paper is 5.5 wide. And I want it to be 5 inches by 7 inches. So I'm going to mark 5, and that means it's ½ an inch too big. So since I know this is ½ an inch, I can just line this up. Draw a line. Now this looks a little crooked, but that's okay because sometimes the paper itself might actually be a little crooked, so that's fine. It might not be perfect, but you know what? When it goes in a frame, no one's gonna know the difference. And now I'm gonna measure my paper. It is 8.5 inches. I want that to be 7. So 7 inches is here. And you'll notice I always mark on each side of the ruler, because that is going to give me 2 lines to match up. And then I can also make sure, because my ruler is see-through, I'll match up one of my thinner lines and make sure that that is perpendicular. And perpendicular, for those who don't know, means this makes a 90-degree angle. Now I'm going to take my craft scissors, not fabric scissors, the craft scissors. Now if you have one of those cool like guillotine color cutters or slice cutters, this is a perfect time to use them. I have them, I'm just too lazy to get them out. I'm just going to carefully trim those edges. Yeah, art. I love art. It's so relaxing. Most of the time. Then there's those days where you're just like, how do I draw? And even I have those days, and I've been, you know, doing art for 25 plus years, and I'll have days where I sit down and I'm just like, how do draw. So don't worry. It's all good. We all have those days. Okay. I'm gonna get my board out. Now for this one, there's two different ways that you could do a picture. The last time we did a picture, it was vertical. That's known as portraits. This is the portrait style where like you could draw like a person, and that's why it's called portrait. Or, in this case, I am doing landscape. Why is my world crooked? There we go. So I'm going to put my canvas horizontal. And now it's time to get the blue tape out. And I take enough blue tape to go about an inch over on each edge. And I place the blue tape about 1/4 of an inch in, at most, on one of the edges, all the way across. And you can usually, because blue tape is a little bit translucent, so you can see through it a little bit, especially because the paper's really bright. And then when you press it down, which you'll want to do, make sure that blue tape is flush with the paper. This is to prevent any of the water or the paint from going into your little white border. And then I'll rotate and keep going around in a circle, overlapping each one. Just like we did with the tulip picture. Trying to keep all the edges the same. I'll do this a few times. One of the ways that I usually am able to tell if the edge tape is the same width around is if this little corner here makes a square. So if it's equal on all sides. Rotate it once more. And then press it down, like so. And now, my canvas is ready. Now we're going to get out my fine art supplies, Crayola markers. Now, what I like to do is I will start with not the darkest ones. I'm going to start with like my lighter ones. And I'm actually going to pick not the brightest one, because this is going to go in the center. I'm going to pick my like outline. And basically we're just going to kind of draw some puffy clouds. Because that's what galaxies kind of look like in space. They're just big, puffy clouds. So, I'm going to try and replicate this one as best I can. So I'm going to start with my tropical violet. And in the lower right corner, I'm going to take my Crayola marker. And draw like puffy cloud. And I'm actually using the side. I'm not using the tip of the marker. I'm kind of using the side. And it's okay, the marker's going to soak a bit into the paper, and that is fine. That's what it's going to do. Now, I'm going to go up here in the upper left corner. And I'm going to make another puffy cloud. And then I forgot one other important piece of the project. I forgot to tell you of the supplies. I forgot to prep it, but that's okay. I'll tell you in a moment. And in the left, I just make some curly little cues. Making a puffy cloud. And they're going to be hollow. And your clouds might even look a little different than mine. Look at these ugly looking clouds. Aren't they great? They're going to turn into beautiful galaxies. So now that I have these little lumps, I'm then going to go and take my wild orchid. A nice pretty pinky color. And I'm going to go on the inside. And I might actually overlap these markers a little. And I'm actually going to leave the center of this one bright white. And then I'm going to color in one on top. And I'm going to go and color in most of my other one here on the upper left. And I'm using the side of my marker because that gives me the most coverage rather than using the fine tip. Get my other supply really quick. So now we've done our two light colors. Now we have to mix in the rest of the galaxy, which is going to be these darker colors. So we have like a lighter purple, a darker purple, and then black fills in the rest of our space. So we have all this space to fill in. So I'm going to go with my next lighter color, which is the ultraviolet. And I'm going to start to try and connect these two galaxies. Starting from the outside. I'm going to make another little cloud doohickey. It's going to come off of it on the bottom. And then I'm going to go up here on the left. Now, if you start to get it where it looks like it's starting to run out, I will actually rotate the marker in my hand and move to another side of the marker. Because what's happening is the watercolor paper is absorbing the marker ink, and sometimes that causes the tip to dry out a little bit as it can't get the ink to flow down fast enough. It's not that your marker's dying, it's just that it can't produce enough ink quick enough to get to the paper. And I'm going to put a little bit on the outside of my lumpy cloud up here on the right. So I'm done with this marker. And I'll give you a chance to... Oh wait, I want to put a little bit more on the right side of my lumpy cloud down here. Now we're getting close. This is actually a pretty fast project. The hardest part is actually just waiting for it to dry. So next I'm going to take my plum and we're going to fill in a little bit more of the space. This is more of a dark purple. Dark bluish purple. I'm going to fill in between here. get a little, I'm going to get this little loopy area. I'm just going to outline a little bit up here. And a little bit around. And I might make a little lump over here. Give it its own little space. In space, A. Okay. So now, all we have left are these open areas. This is what we're going to fill with the color black. This we want to make sure gets pretty heavily saturated with the color black. Mostly because if it's too light, it'll turn into this weird, like, bluish, brownish gray color when we add the water to it. So this is where we just have to be slow and steady. And just make sure that all the spots get colored in. So I just go kind of slow. Using the side, rotate my marker as needed. Make sure that there are no little open bubble spaces. Try to avoid getting your hand in the actual marker ink. It is washable. Obviously, it'll wash off your hands when you're done. But if you need to rotate your page, that's fine too. Feel free to go over a little bit of the areas that you've already painted. That's going to make a nice blended look. Don't worry if there's any sort of like weird striping going on or what direction you're coloring in. That's all going to come out in the wash. Quite literally. Alright. So then once you're done, you're going to have something that looks like a really bad tie-dye. And that's okay. So while you finish that up, I'll talk about the other fun, cool thing that I didn't get to show off a lot during the tulip project because we're using lighter colors. I'm going to get to use my favorite thing, which is iodized salt. That's going to get the really cool galaxy resist effect, which is why I wanted to use some darker colors. So that was on my supply list. I do apologize, I did not get to talk about it at the beginning. I completely forgot. So that's my bad, my apologies. But if you've got just like some basic salt, you just put it in your hand and we're going to dribble it over once it's wet. So I'll give you all a chance to finish that up. So the first thing I'm mainly going to be using my big brush. When it comes to doing the painting, do not do this. That will ruin your painting. If you just go straight across it, that'll just mix all the colors together and you will get mud. What we are going to be doing is what is basically like we're just dabbing the brush down. Not like I'm dabbing with my hands. We are taking the paintbrush as it is wet and gently pressing it down and pushing the ink around into where we want it to be. We're not stroking the brush in any direction. We are pressing it down in little dabs. And by doing this, this will get very specific areas wet. We are not doing this. This is a big no. This is what we're doing. So take your paintbrush right now. I implore you, before it's wet, practice doing this. Just up and down, very gently. Pushing it into the paper. This is what we'll be doing. This is our motion. This is no, we're not doing this. If you do this, you'll just end up with mud. This is what we're doing. It's a gentle dab. Dab, 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 dab. This is the secret to getting this. Just a gentle press. I cannot emphasize this enough. This is what we are doing. Gentle press. Also, the other thing I cannot emphasize enough is that we are going to be putting the brush in the water, but it is not going to be completely soaked. It will be somewhat wet. So we're going to take a lot of the water out of the brush because we want the paper to be wet, but not super soaking. So I'm going to grab my water cup. I'm going to grab my paper towel. The first things that I am going to attack with this painting, I'm always going to start in my lightish areas first. Because if I start with the dark areas, what that's going to do is that's going to taint the water with the darker colors. If I take the dark water and I put it in my light areas, that will muddy them. If I use the lighter colors first, that will add the light color to the water. If I add the light water to the dark areas, you're not going to see them. That won't matter. So if I mix it with these dark blues, purples, and blacks, and then I have this dark bluish purple water, and then try and put it in this white zone, that's going to turn into a gray. And I don't want that. So we're going to start by going into the middle of our galaxies first. So let's start with this one up here. And you can rotate your page to make it easier to get to. You do not have to keep it in one spot. This is not, you don't have to keep it stationary. You can move it. Alright, so I am taking my water and I am actually rubbing it against the side of the edge a couple of times here. So it is wet, but it is not dripping. It is not soaking wet. It is just moist. And I'm going to start dabbing very gently as it starts to pick up the marker. And I'm going to just barely touch the outside edge where the dark is, so it just starts to kind of blend. Just dab it a little bit. And then I'm going to leave it be and put my brush back in the water. And then I'm going to stop. And I'm going to go to the next zone. I'm going to go to this zone down here. Take my brush. Wipe it out. So it's wet, but not too wet. Start in my pink zone. See how that kind of just fills that in there? And then I'm gonna slowly dab around to each of the sections. And I'm gonna touch the edge of the dark. But I'm not going to go far into the dark, because that'll make my water too muddied. But I want just a little bit of blending into it. Now what's fun is with all the water that's here, it's gonna pool and it's gonna make its own watery effects. So now, while these two areas are wet, I'm gonna put my brush, I'm gonna wet it a little bit. Can even add a little more water. There's some things around if I want. While these two zones are wet, I can take my salt, put a little bit in one hand. While they're wet, drop some salt into the area I just painted, because I'm not going to touch that area again. I'm going to wait for that to dry. Now the zone that I did just paint, that kind of dried. So I can go and add a little bit more water if I wanted. And drop some salt. Try to make sure it's not in the parts you haven't painted yet. So if there's any parts you want to add some of the cool salt resist, drop a little bit of water. Drop a couple pieces of salt. Just make sure it's not in the dry zones. And then get rid of the salt. Alright, so now we have one last bright area we want to do. And then we get to go to the dark areas. So once again, taking my water, letting the larger drops of water out of my brush. See how light my water is still. This is not very light, or not very dark. This is good. This means I can still deal with this. So, I'm going to start in my center. Slowly just dab down. Also, in a little bit of my research, apparently similar things like this can be done with permanent markers and rubbing alcohol. This is a lot less stinky. I like this version a lot easier. And once again, barely touching the dark part, just to get a little bit of that blend in there. But see, as you notice, as I'm dabbing down, all of those marker parts, all those lines just kind of disappear. Now let's say I wanted to pull some of that dark purple into my bright pink area. Can do that. That's a thing that can be done. Don't know if those are bubbles or not, so I'm going to pop them with my finger. Yep, there are bubbles. Cool. So now let's say I wanted some salt in that area. I'm going to put a little bit in my hand. Drop some in there. While it is wet. And what I like about the salt in this particular case is it gets that cool, like, starry nebula feel. Alright. So we've done our light areas. Now we can start going and dabbing into the dark parts. So I'm going to start down here, because that's a small part. Might as well take care of that. Gonna take all the heavy drops out of my brush. Start in from the bottom. And I just barely touch top. with each section. I'm not even going to bother putting salt down there. That's such a tiny area. Slowly go in and dab. My purple area. Into my dark area. Just kind of vaguely touching the light. Now as I mix this part, this one section is now obviously been made wet. I am now going to drop some salt into that area. As you can see, I'm basically just pushing ink around at this point. Hopefully that's wet enough. If it's not, we'll find out soon. And then we'll do the last section over here. Once again, just the dabs. Just barely touching areas that blended for. Oh, that one's going into there. Guess that's becoming a cool galaxy. Sweet. Can't stop it. Not gonna. That's just how it's gonna be. Alright. Gonna add a little bit more water. Some of this. Go in, see if maybe some of this can join the other. Trying to keep it a little bit away from joining the edges there. Ooh. Some spots I could blend. Alright. And we'll do one last drop of some salt. And then I'm going to go in with my slightly narrower brush and do a little bit of last blending. Get a little bit of wet. Because I've got some, like, really obvious demarcations of areas. So I can now take my smaller brush, or you can use the big brush, that's fine, and try and blend my edges. So I'm just wetting down the spaces in between. So they'll look a little more natural, as it were. I'd say start from the, whoops, there we go. Sorry, got off the screen there. Starting from the light, going into the dark would be best. And always clean your brush when you can. This is me just going back and forth in a little bit of the areas. Trying to get it to look a little more blended. And that's the nice thing about that I discovered with these washable markers, is that you can always add like a little bit more water. Like it'll make it a little more transparent, but you can always seem to blend it a little more. Alright, so now I'm going to let that dry, which is probably the most time-consuming part of this whole thing. So it's not exactly the same, but it is similar. So now I'm going to clean out my brushes, as I don't need that. And this would be a good time to change your water out, because we will need to paint some white on here once it dries. So I'm going to change that. Still pretty wet. Sometimes if you have pools of water, you can use paper towels to blot some things up, speed that up. If you're really gentle with a hair dryer, sometimes that helps. And what's neat is every time you do this, it's going to come out different. Like, you can't get the same results every single time because of the way that water's going to flow, the way that the salt's going to react to things, and the way the markers lay down. So if your galaxy looks different, that's fine. That's your galaxy. That's yours. All cool. Brush some of my salt off here. Whoop, I did it a little too early. Brush some of the paint around. That was my bad. I got excited and wanted to clean things off. Shame on me. Look at that. That's okay. That happens. See? Don't be me. Brushed all this up here. Didn't realize this was still that wet. But that's okay. That just means it's a windy galaxy. Might be little mistakes. Look at that. I got paint on me now. See if I can rinse a little bit of that off. But that's okay. That happens. You live and you learn. Alright, most of that is dry now. So some of the last things I wanted to add, and this is usually better to do once it is fully dry. If you're really careful, you can get a hairdryer and put it on like heat and low, and just very gently hairdryer over it to set it if you're in a hurry. If you are not in a hurry, you can just wait for it to dry. But because I'm in class here and want to show people, we're going to do the next step, which is adding all of our stars. So what you'll need, so I have this palette, which you may recognize as blue from another project of ours. I believe when we were making our styrofoam block printing. I'm going to take my acrylic paint. I'm just going to put a dab of white. You really don't need a ton. I just put like maybe less than a nickel. Looks to be about a penny size. For those who work with American currency. Okay. So I looked up galaxies. And there are big stars, little tiny stars, and then of course I like to put my little plus sign stars like they're twinkling. I have grinders going for added effect, add the space core from Portal. Yes! If you can fit them in there. I agree. So, an easy way to do dots is you can actually use the end of your paintbrush. If you've got a nice narrow paintbrush, take the end of your paintbrush, poke it into your paint. You can just, boop, make some big dots. And they can be pretty much anywhere. So I put a bunch of these, starting out. Because honestly, there's a lot of stars in space, and that's a little bit of what the salt was supposed to help emulate, was the stars and the nebulas and things like that in the distance. So then, boop, boop, did those. Now I'm going to add a bunch of my little stars, which I will use this brush for. So I get the brush wet. I'm gonna make sure it's not too wet. I mostly just want to shape it to a point. And then I put some paint on it. And I go in and just add a bunch of dots. And on occasion, put little twinkling plus sign, because I like twinkling stars, just like when we were doing the canvas with the tree, the nighttime sky. And you can do big stars, you can do lots of little tiny stars, because there are a lot of stars in space. So feel free, fill your canvas with lots of tiny little stars. Lots of little twinkling, awesome stars. I've seen some people, when they do galaxies, they'll use like gold paint to give cool little like gold accents, which are super fun. Just add all your happy little stars. And depending on how wet your paper is, they might fade a little bit, and that's okay. The stars would stay a little bit better if the paper was drier, but I'm working a little bit on time crunch because I want to show you how it's all made. So if you want to wait and do this step later, that's totally fine. And once your night sky is filled to your heart's content, you can wait for the acrylic to dry, which is nice because acrylic dries very quickly. The only thing left that I ask that you do is that you take your paint and in a nice corner somewhere, sign it. Because this is yours. You made this. I'm very proud of you. People always kind of be like, I can't make art. No, you can make art. I believe in you. You know what? We made this with Crayola markers. How about them apples? Crayola markers made this beautiful piece. Look at that. Looks like a galaxy. So once we've signed our beautiful piece of artwork, and it's all nice and dry, we are then ready to release it into the world, into the wild, and with that, we'll need to remove our tape. So, I will find the top layer of tape and begin to gently pull it away from my painting. And then proceed with each layer after that. Grab it by the corner and pull it away. And because it's painter's tape, it should not stick to my painting. And your painting might be a little bumpy when it first comes off. You can always flatten that with like a heavy book. That's totally fine. There we go. And with that, you have a galaxy. Look at that. Ta-da! Only took about, what, an hour, 40 minutes, something like that. Look at that. We made that with these. How cool is that? Now imagine the cool other galaxies we could make with all the different colors I have. Yeah. So, that's pretty neat. Really impressed. I'm gonna try and see what other types of paintings I can make with these new, basically like really inexpensive watercolor markers I have now. So yeah, there you go. A watercolor painting made with Crayola markers. And some salt. How cool. Neat. Alright. So with that, I will return back to the main view here. Hold it up in reality. So there is my finished work of today. Here's my one I made to test. I mean, they're similar. They almost look like they could go together. But yeah, so this is cool. This is like magic. Look at that. Made some space. So hopefully everyone had a fun time learning how to make a galaxy using Crayola markers that you probably might have in your home or can easily find. Feel free to take this technique and use it on other things. I'm really curious to try and use it on some other artwork. I've got some bigger watercolor paper I could start to try and use it on, like paintings, see where I could pull it out into and what sort of blending I could get out of it. So it's really neat. I really like this whole process. This is really cool. So I wanted to thank everyone for coming to class. Next week, I don't know what the project will be on hand. I'll be doing some research and seeing what I have on hand in here and what we've used before and what I might feel like doing. So keep an eye out on my Facebook page, is where I tend to post all of the class syllabus, along with, like, I'll have downloadable PDFs that I'll have in my Dropbox for people. I also post like pictures and JPEG versions and things that you can download to see. So if anyone has any suggestions or ideas of things they want to learn or know how to do, please let me know. drop comments on my page, drop comments on the YouTube video, like, hey, I'm really interested in blah, blah, blah. Let me know. I'll see what I can find. Other than that, thank you very much for attending class this week. I hope you all had a fun and relaxing time. And I will see you all hopefully next time. And with that, I'm going to hit stop on the record, and I will see you all in the next class.